Hi there, Linda Goodall here. One of the features I really love about Hatch is that I can create my own motifs to expand on the ones that are already included. Creating motifs is pretty easy, but there are a few tricks and they're easy to overlook, so I'm going to show you how to do that. So recently, I kind of went on a binge making motifs, which you can see from these two journal covers. Most of the stitches you see here are motifs. Some are built in, some are new ones that I created. And they're really easy and they're really fun. This is paper piecing in the hoop, or crazy patch in the hoop. So all the piecing is done in the hoop, all the stitches are applied in the hoop, and then the journals are not in the hoop projects, they're just made in the normal old-fashioned sewing machine way. So it is a rather futzy thing to do this piecing in the hoop thing, but it's way faster than doing it by hand. So let's see how to make the motifs. So here I am in Hatch. Motifs can be simple or complex. So let's start by making a simple feather design. This is a 100 by 100 hoop, just to give you an idea of the reference size. I'm going to turn my hoop off, and I'm going to right click on grid, and I want to set my grid to 1 by 1. Didn't get that hoop off, so let me click that again. And now I'm going to zoom way in. Now, normally I don't digitize at this kind of ratio, but I do when I'm making motifs. So I'm just going to make a simple little feather motif. I have this already drawn out on a piece of graph paper, so if you're wondering how I'm doing this, I'm not just working out of my head, I'm actually working off a piece of paper. And I'm just going to start by digitizing an open shape. It's going to be a run, single run. There's some places where I'm going to do some backtracking, so it'll get doubled up. So I'm going to start by clicking, and I'm just left clicking for the whole thing. I'm going to go over 2 squares, 2 millimeters, and then I'm going to go up 4 squares and over 4 squares. And then same thing down. Then I'm going to go over 1.5 squares, or 2.5 squares rather. And this time I'll go 3. Sometimes I'll do this with half grid or 0.5 grid, but it just gets so busy looking on the screen. We'll just do it this way. And then 1.5 or 2.5 again, and up 1, and 1, and then over to about here, I think, and hit enter, and there's my motif. Now usually I work with the true view off, but it's kind of hard to see my screen with true view off, so we'll just leave it this way. And I have it set as a single run. It's set at a length of 4 millimeters because I was doing that last, but normally it'll come up with a length of 2 millimeters and a minimum length of 0.8. I like to reset these for longer stitches, and the reason I do that is I want these to look more like hand stitches. And we are doing a double run here. Sometimes I'll do triple runs on these, but I didn't do that on this one, just to keep it simple. And then I'm going to go to the stitching tab, and I want to turn off auto tie-offs, because when we apply this as a motif, we're applying it to an object and it'll be on there multiple times, and the object will get tie-offs. We don't want tie-offs on this one because it could tie in, do my little thing, tie off, and then do another one, and that would just really run up the stitch counts and make it look blobby there. So we want to make sure that we have tie-offs turned off there. So our motif is done. Well, actually, the design is done. We haven't turned it into a motif yet. So to do that, we select the object, we click on Create Motif. And I already have a library created, but let's create a new library, because if I do the drop down here to select my library, you see that I only have 2 of them here, and they're not the built-in ones. So you can't add motifs to the built-in library, which is a good thing, because you want to be able to back them up in case you have to update your Hatch. You wouldn't want your libraries overwritten. So we'll create a new motif library, and we'll just call this feathers. Now, I think that rather than have one giant library, if you have tons of motifs or you're creating different kinds of motifs, I think you should create different libraries. And it doesn't matter if there's only a handful of items in there. You may add to them over time, but this way it just keeps them organized. Now we have to give this guy a name, and we need to keep our names short because really long names don't all fit in that little tablet, in the little palette there. So I'm just going to name this F for feather, and I'm going to give it a 3-digit number with leading zeros, and we'll just call it F001. And I'll click OK. And now, if you look down here, it says enter start point of the reference line. And I'm going to click right there, and then it's going to ask for the second one, and I'm going to click right there. And it's been added. Now let me talk a minute about this reference line thing. When I first started making those motifs, I thought that the line had to line up on the start and end point. It doesn't. In this case, that's the center of the line, and sometimes that's nice to have because that second reference point will end up being a pivot point, and that will put the pivot point in the middle rather than put it, you know, like up there or down there. So I like to vary where I have that, because if, let's say that this motif didn't have this bottom part, it was only going up and up and up and up and up, I might want to just have my line here, because that way I know where the baseline of my design is going to be. So this reference line is kind of like the pivot line or the pivot point for the element in the motif, because you can do that in Hatch, and it's also the starting point. So remember, I had the in-out point here, so let me just press H, and you can see there's the green start point, there's the red exit point. So that, here's a big tip. Your first reference point should be on the same side as your start point. It could be down here, it could be up here, but it needs to be on this side for the start point. So now let's check our thing here. So we'll zoom out a little bit. I'll just digitize another open shape, just a line. And there it is as a run. And I need to select my object here. I just pressed O on the keyboard to get that up. And look, there's my little motif. So if I want to have more repeats, what I need to do is press H. And see, that adds more repeats. If I select the object and do a drag select, it makes the repeats bigger. So it depends on how you want to make your, if you have a bigger space, you either extend your line to add more repeats, or you can drag it out and make it bigger. So let's see what else we can do with this little guy. Because now that we've made one motif and we've seen how easy it is, let's see what else we can do with this little thing. So I'm going to right click and drag, get a copy down there. Actually, I'm going to go out of true view here. I'm going to zoom in. I can't see what I'm doing here. Make a new point, and I'm going to drag this back here. Maybe extend that a little bit more. Now what's going to happen is this is going to stitch out like this and back. So I'll press T for true view, and we'll back out a bit. And now I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees. I'm kind of disoriented because this is a much smaller screen than I'm used to working on, so things aren't exactly where I expect them to be. Okay, so there it is. It's rotated. Let's move it down to a grid. Now I'm going to duplicate it, Control D, and then I'm going to mirror it. And I'm going to move it over 6. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 4, 6. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. So I'm going to move it over 6 millimeters. You remember, this is a 1 millimeter grid. And now I need to do a little bit of work here. And I'm going to click over to the resequence bar here. And I'll do a 3mm line, and I put that on there because I forgot to change it. Single run, select that, so we go back to run, and then I'm going to do a 6mm run there, and then I'm going to do a 3mm run there. So let's go to our resequence. There's that first one. Move that up there. There's our longer one that's in the middle. And here's our shorter one. Now what I did here was I took the space here, which was 6mm. I divided it by 2. That's how I got the distance for these two. So that makes it an even looking design. So I'm just going to select all of those and group them. They don't have to be grouped. I just like to do that. And we'll make that into a motif. So create motif. We'll call this F002. Oops. Zeros, not O's. F002. And what I forgot to do was, we'll see if it's still okay. I forgot to take off the trims. Object properties. So now do I have to delete the old one since I messed that one up? No. If I take this one and just do that again, so we'll make it a motif, create motif, F002, and see, it tells me it's already there. Do you want to overwrite it? Yes. And now I need to tell it my entry points, and it's there. So let's see what this one does. Why don't we just clone this line? Right click and drag, and we'll go to Object Properties, Outline, apply that, and there's our second one. Let's see how these sew. So it's a good idea to check your sewing sequence here. And if we want to just watch that one, let's turn that one red. And we'll go to the player. And I could just zoom up there to the red to see it, that one. But see how it's building out this way? Nice. We'll zip it along a little faster here. So let me clue you into a few things here. This pattern is always going to start at this end, and it's going to stitch this way. But what if we want our design to stitch in the opposite direction? We want it to stitch in that direction. Well, the only way we can do it is if we mirror it. If we wanted to start stitching this at this end and stitch that way, we have to do something a little different. We can't reverse the sewing order here. If we go to reshape, you'll see that we have the out point, but we don't have access to the end point. So what we need to do here is to make a mirrored version of this. So all we have to do to do that, I'm going to select this guy, right click and drag. I'm going to mirror him, and I'm going to do reshape H and just swap the in out points. Now I could have just swapped the in out points and not mirrored it, but I like to always work from left to right. That way when I see it in the library, I know what direction it's going to stitch. It's always going to stitch from this direction to that direction. So we just make this one into a motif, create motif, F003, or I could have done F001R for reverse. Sometimes I do that. And tell the beginning, first one, second one, and it's been created. And if we Control drag again, or right drag, and then apply that one. You can see that it's going in the opposite direction. So just to be sure, let's do the H. See, there's the out point. Remember, we mirrored this one. That's why it's going in the same direction. Let me show you something that can go wrong. So let's say that we wanted to right click and drag. I'm going to just mirror this. And I'm thinking, okay, I want it to go in that direction, so I'll just mirror it. And then I go to create motif, F00, what are we up to now? 5. And then I'm going to tell it, there's my entry point, there's my exit point, it's been created, and let's draw a line. Draw our line and put our motif on it. Yep, there's number 5. It looks right. Let's change it to a different color. And we'll go to player. And we're going to just let it get up there. And I'm going to slow this down so you can see what's going on. Look where it's starting. See, we've got to have this start point match. When we do those reference points, this one, the first one, has to match the direction of our stitching, or it's going to sew these individually and then jump over, sew backwards, jump over, sew backwards, and not good. So that's the basics of how to make a motif. These could be applied to runs or fills. I basically made all these in the Crazy Quilt library to be used for motif runs. And one thing to know about these is a lot of these are triple stitched. And yeah, you could use them in a fill. There's no reason why you can't, but it's going to run up your stitch count. And usually in a fill you don't want a triple stitch motif. You want just a single run or some backtracking where you have to. But I wanted these to look more like hand stitching, which is heavier. And because these are just isolated elements pretty much, you want a little heavier look. So in this design, everything, all the decorative parts, except the monogram and the satin border, are motifs. Some of them are from the built-in motifs. This one's one of the blackwork designs. This one is a motif that I brought in as a stamp, and then I did a little resequencing on it so that it would stitch one forward and one backwards. Here I did a little bit more work and made a little row. But you can have a lot of fun with these. Now here I've got some nested. Here I have 2 different types nested. Let me look at the resequence bar here because I could hide some stitches to make this a little more visible. Because all this first business here, this is the piecing in the hoop. So let's just hide that. And there you can see all the decorative designs. Now, remember when we were doing those reference lines? And it was kind of going down the middle. See, it kind of goes down the middle there. But on this one, the line is on the edge. So it kind of depends. These are connected right here. And I decided that because I would probably want to use this as my alignment line, I did that line on the bottom of the design rather than, say, through the center like this one is. Now, this is a case where I had to use a mirrored version because there's one going down that way, and then I had to create a new motif and have it going the other direction. So see how they kind of loop together down there, and they just thought I butted them up together really closely. This is a motif too. I just placed it as a motif stamp. So when you use the motif stamp tool, you can bring in any motif as a single element and just plop it down in your design. So if we look here, you can see that there are a lot of pieces to that design, but it's still a motif. And it's got triple stitches and single runs. So you can have a lot of fun with motifs. You got to play around with them though, because there's a lot of things they can do that I didn't show you here. They're just so powerful, and they can create such interesting designs. I mean, look at this design. How much richer it is in texture and in color than if it just had, say, a zigzag stitch or a run stitch to top stitch all those areas down. It's really pretty. So thanks for watching. I hope this has given you some ideas on trying out Hatch and motifs.